Today's video, I want to talk about how TurboTax and other self-tax preparation softwares are keeping you poor. Really, the idea of the video is to explain when you should be doing your own taxes and when you should be hiring a CPA to do your taxes. Now, obviously, there's self-interest in the video as I'm a CPA you can hire to help you do your taxes. But I also, when people come to me and they don't really need my help, I'm not going to tell them, oh, you definitely need my help. Obviously, I want you to get the best thing done right, and I want to be able to help people. And if I'm not providing value, I'm not helping anyone. So TurboTax and other self-tax preparation softwares are things that you can use to put in your own information and do your taxes all by yourself. It's pretty obvious. But I came across a client this week who was doing his own taxes and overpaid by hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes because he did it himself and he did it all incorrectly. So I'm going to go over that example as an example of when you probably shouldn't do your own taxes. So let's start first. When should you be able to do your own taxes? Now in the US, if you have a regular job, like if you work at Applebee's or you work at Walmart or you work at Morgan Stanley, and you have this bank job and you get a W-2 and that reports your wages and you're an American and maybe you get also some 1099s, you can input that. You can do your taxes yourself. It's pretty easy. And there's no deductions, there's nothing extra. Apart from that, if you're an entrepreneur and you have a business and you're making money especially, or you're making big investments, you want to work with someone to make sure you capture all the investments, classify them all the correct way, and then you file them all correctly. Some of the big issues I see is that people will have a successful business, or they even have a side hustle. If you have a side hustle and you make $40,000, there's still things we can do to greatly reduce your taxes to where the cost of paying a couple $1,000s for a CPA, you're going to save. If you spend $3,000 on a CPA, but you save $8,000 in taxes, it's obviously worth it. So it's really good to explore that when you have your own business or when you're traveling internationally. I know they have self-prepared tax softwares for people who live in other countries. If you have a regular job but you're living abroad and you can claim the foreign income exclusion on your own and you're getting the full exclusion, you're not having an issue, it's pretty low risk. But it's really like my entrepreneurs and my foreign-owned U.S. business owners, especially when you have corporations and there's foreign disclosures, I really would recommend you get a second opinion on this. So let me tell you the story of these guys I just talked to the other day. They're in South America and they opened up a number of different LLCs and they got advice from an accountant 8 years ago when they were living in the U.S. on how to file their taxes. So they were living in the U.S. and they were doing their 1065, their K-1s, and they were doing their 1120s as well because they had a corporation and they had a multi-member LLC, and they were filing them all themselves. They were doing that fine, and then in the last 4 years, they started to make a lot of money. And they also, in the last 4 years, left the U.S. and ceased to be U.S. tax residents. So that means that they didn't have to pay U.S. income taxes anymore. First mistake they didn't file a dual status tax return to break their residency in the U.S. So the U.S. government, the IRS, is just waiting for tax returns. They didn't file a tax return saying, hey, we didn't do an exit statement. They didn't do a dual status return. They didn't file a 1040-NR. They didn't tell the IRS they left the U.S. They just kept filing 1040s. A Form 1040 is a resident income tax return for an American. So if you keep filing 1040s, the IRS you should be reporting your worldwide income. So we have to amend the tax returns and file a 1040-NR instead of a Form 1040. It's quite complicated, and when you're asking for money back from the IRS, they are extremely slow, and they don't like to do it. They will, especially if you have the right stance and you're taking the right tax position. But if that's not the case, then it just takes forever in any case. So the first mistake was they didn't file their dual status return. The second mistake, I guess, is that they filed the wrong tax returns personally every year. And in filing these 1040s, they weren't including all of the activities they should have, and they included the business income that shouldn't have been included on a 1040. It shouldn't have been taxable. So we're going to have to amend the returns, file a 1040-NR, use the same social, and then request a refund. This has to be done in a very particular way. But they were doing the taxes themselves because they always had been, and they left the U.S. And really, in the last couple of years, they made a lot of money, and they've been paying taxes on all this income. And then also, on their corporate return, these guys have, because they became foreign persons, there's additional reporting requirements on the Form 1120. You have to disclose related party transactions, very similar to a foreign-owned single-member LLC. So they had to report the related party transactions. That has a $25,000 penalty if you don't report it each year. And they had the other LLCs that they never filed Form 5472 for because when they were residents, they didn't have to. So they made a ton of mistakes in this example. And, you know, we're going to do our best to mitigate the penalties and also offset that by getting refunds for the very large amount of taxes that they paid that they shouldn't have paid. And we're going to work hard to get that money back for them. But this is obviously a huge cost that they've paid, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars that they've paid over the last 3 years that we're going to be able to get back for them. But it's going to be a lot of headache and they should have never paid it in the first place. Now, we went through it. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're doing cross-border transactions, obviously, like, I don't know if it's obvious, but it's more complicated than if you're just an American living in the US with a job, or potentially an American with a simple job working overseas, which again, they have expat tax software. It's complicated, but if you've been doing it for years and years, the forms can look the same and you could potentially do it. And then you can hire someone like me and we can give you a second opinion. Although oftentimes, if you are in any kind of entrepreneur, we can find different ways to save you taxes. Oftentimes, I even find client ways to more efficiently run their business or structure their transactions or time their payments so that they're paying less taxes in the first place. You know, at the end of the day, if you need help and you need assistance doing your taxes, yes, the cheaper option could be use software and do it yourself. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you end up paying a lot more taxes, you end up paying penalties, and you end up having all these expenses, it's actually going to be cheaper to hire someone to do it for you, not to even factor in all the time you spent doing it. So I don't think everyone needs to work with me. I think I'm great and we have a great service. But if you want to find out if we're a good fit, you can schedule a free call at jamesbakercpa.com/schedule, and you can schedule a free call with my team. You can see about the type of people we work with and the clients that we're helping every day. I specialize in cross-border transactions. So if you're a foreign person with U.S. interests, or if you're a U.S. person with foreign interests, I can tell you what forms you need to file, how to structure your operations, and what we need to do to really minimize your tax exposure and your actual tax expense. So without going into too much additional detail here, TurboTax is keeping you poor if you are using it and doing it and using the software wrong. Honestly, many businesses can't even use TurboTax because it doesn't have the forms in the software that you're required to file. TurboTax and these other tax softwares really are best for regular Americans with single jobs and maybe single investments who have their own houses and they have very simple tax returns. And I definitely do recommend it for doing your taxes yourself. There is a free file way that TurboTax has too, but I do recommend doing that if you're in the US and looking into that. But if you're a business owner, you know, there's definitely ways we can structure your businesses to reduce your audit risk as well. If you have an LLC and you're doing a big business, even if it's not going to save you taxes, if you put it in a multi-member LLC and file a separate tax return, it's going to greatly reduce your audit risk, and that's something we look at as well. So I don't want to ramble on. I want to get to the point, keep these videos valuable for you guys. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video, and schedule a free call if you need help with your taxes and any of your filing stuff, okay? And don't get in trouble doing a TurboTax like my clients. Okay, thanks.